Just fucking do it. Subscribe now.
All of the employees, they shared in the success of the movie. It doesn't detail exactly how the share worked, but if you had a winning idea or concept, you got a $20,000 bonus. So it was a rewarding, inclusive, open culture. There was numerous departures from Disney, and these guys were going back out into the market, and that was mainly caused because Disney went on a pretty aggressive cost-cutting exercise. They were really trying to bring those costs down, and it resulted in profitable movies being released, but the quality was no good. At the same time, this talent, which is bleeding out of Disney, is going to Pixar. It actually ended up DreamWorks and a number of other studios that were coming out of it. Also, I mean, it's almost like a perfect shitstorm, right? Which ended up playing into Jobs' hand. He was obviously aware of the fact that he had this studio, they were developing software to create these movies, but he didn't have the distribution network that Disney had. He wasn't able to extract all of the revenue that Disney was able to produce from the movies that he was producing at Pixar. And there's a quote that says, we're really enjoying working with Disney or going to Disney University, we're learning a lot, right? So fast forward, Eisner and Jobs, renegotiation for the 5-movie deal broke down. So I would imagine it was a battle of egos, which then stopped it. When Eisner was replaced by Iger, he realized that he needed to get this new deal going with Pixar because 2D animation was phasing out and CG was going to be the way to go. Obviously, the costs associated with producing 2D as opposed to 3D were also coming down at the same time as technology was developing. So following on from that, you've got the talent bleed, you've got Disney now with their new head of the studios that came in, I'll remember his name later, was focusing on action movies. They weren't focusing on CG. And in fact, during the year prior to this deal happening, they produced one CG movie and it didn't even touch the lowest box office number for Pixar. So my conclusion from all of that, you've now got an animation company, right? Cartoon, feature movie producer, which now has no talent, terrible culture, and they're not making money from the movies which are their bread and butter. At the same time, you've got the rise of these guys, which have now adopted the same inclusive culture that was here, is now happening here, and it's being led by the main guys who created this on this side. So they've just poached their entire team. They're producing movies, the movies are making money, and now they know that, I'm sure that Jobs was viewing it away from animation, away from, just wanting to be in a creative business, knew that he had the upper hand on Disney. And whether or not, they painted themselves into a corner. It was a sliding shitstorm which got worse and worse and worse. And then they realized that in order for them, because they made numerous attempts to create their own CG operation, and it failed terribly in both instances. So, in my opinion, this was the only thing that could have happened.
And hindsight being 2020, it was successful. They went on to make all kinds of award-winning movies, and it's still, it made Jobs be in a position to go back to his first love, the Apple, and so this from a shitstorm turned into a sunny holiday in Hawaii, and without a cloud in the sky. But most of mergers fail not because the numbers don't make sense; it's because the cultures clash. And
I think they needed it.
Yeah, and there's no way to write a code for culture exchange. Just as there's no code algorithm for 50 years experience, the thousands of transactions I've been involved in. But artificial intelligence, maybe in 100 or 200 years, will replace me. We'll have a hologram sitting up here of somebody screaming at you, or screaming at somebody else.
There was one other point that is important for this, which I left out, that even though Pixar were adding about 15% to the revenue, it accounted for 60% of the bottom line for Disney. So they, if they lost them, the share price was going to go down.
But Pixar's motivation to sell was basically because of the distribution network that Disney had.
Yeah.
They could sell their movies better.
Yeah, they could sell, and what they could make more money out of it, because if they went and partnered with anybody else, they didn't have the same distribution network. They weren't able to extract so much money from the clients. Cruise ships, the parks, memorabilia sold through the stores.
The DVDs, it's all that stuff.
Yeah, all of that stuff was where you were able to really bump up. I mean, it's less than 40% of the overall revenue you can generate from the production of a successful movie. But it made sense, and it made Jobs the largest single shareholder in Disney.
Good job.
Any questions?
Yeah. Good.
Can I ask, why do people not think this was a good deal?
Because it was a share deal. If it had not been a share deal, would you have done it for the amount of money that they paid? And the answer was probably not, because it didn't. It could have only worked as a share deal, either that or 100% seller finance, which isn't going to happen in this case. So the only way the numbers really worked out is a share deal, because they didn't have to come up with any cash. Although it didn't start out a share for share deal. It started out originally, you read in the newspapers, it was going to be a cash deal, and then cash and shares, and then at the end of the day, it was all shares. And of course, every time they switched the currency, so to speak, the price went up. I'm telling you, your shares aren't worth anything, and the CEO of this type of company, he looks at his shares, not like a monopoly money, that's too harsh, but it's not cash. It's not a balance sheet item. You're not having to write a check. And there's, and in that regard, they view shares just as I tell you to view your shares. It's all right to only have 60% of something as opposed to 100% of nothing. And most of the kids that use the model start with 100% of nothing. And so, but it makes sense. It's easy to talk about acquisitions that look back, that made sense. There's some that we're going to talk about in the next couple of days that didn't make sense and still don't make sense. Okay, any questions? Of course, you've heard this before, right? Okay, any questions of me before I leave?
I have a question, because I'm getting mixed advice. When we're
Mixed advice from who?
from
The
my
pundits-
advisors, from
But the pundits in this room, I wouldn't listen.
and
Other than
pundits in
Raymond,
this
I wouldn't listen
room.
too closely to anything anybody's got to say, other than Raymond and myself.
In my situation, I have several deals that are ready to go to banks. And so I'm hearing from some people on my board, let's just do one at a time. And then others, just serve them out to different banks, each deal. And you can run them concurrently. My concern is, if I'm doing SBA, will it affect if I have Bank A running with
Well,
deal
first of
one?
all, you have to list to the SBA bank the other deals that you're trying to do. You can't keep them in the dark. I almost said in the cloud. In the dark. So as soon as you tell the SBA that, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to withdraw, or they're going to say, bring as many of these deals to come up to your $5 million limits
All at once.
all at once, and they're going to cross-collateralize them.
We don't do that.
And you can do it. We got a couple guys up there that have done it. But I mean, and then when a deal falls out, if you have a $1 billion, no, that's an exaggeration. If you have $100 million in equity, and $5 or $10 million falls out for whatever reason, and you've got more than enough equity for all the deals, they're going to ask you, how are you going to replace that $10 million now? You only got 90, we like 100.